my big book of stories and rhymes. Stories and rhymes in this book were previously published by Ladybird Books Limited, and teddy bear tales, animal stories, nursery rhymes, and stories for bedtime. Illustrated by Peter Stevenson. The Princess and the Pea. Princes must marry princesses. There's no point in them falling in love with ordinary girls, no matter how pretty they are. Everyone knows that, especially princes. Once there was a prince who desperately wanted to get married. But, poor thing, he couldn't find the right princess. His mother and father, the king and queen, did their best to help him. They even took their summer vacations in places where they met lots of princesses. When they got back, they'd say, "Oh, by the way, we saw this lovely girl." The prince would smile and say, "I bet she's a princess." And his parents would reply, "How did you guess?" "We've got her address. Why don't we invite her for a weekend?" Unfortunately, the prince never managed to fall in love. He almost fell in love. In fact, once he was engaged for over a year to a princess from Transylvania. But finally the engagement was called off. Good thing it was. They would never have lived happily ever after. One dark November day a storm blew up. The wind lashed the palace roof so hard that shingles blew off like a storm of confetti. Trees in the royal park were uprooted, and the river burst its banks. It was so gloomy that the lights had to be put on by 3:30. The king hated wasting candles, and it was so cold that the fires had to be banked right up. And the rain, it came down in buckets. Not even the royal dogs, who lay sorrowfully in their baskets dreaming of sunshine and rabbits, wanted to go out. About 8 o'clock there was a knock at the palace door. A servant was sent. He came back and whispered something in the king's ear. "Who says she's a princess?" the king asked, surprised. "The young lady at the door says so, sire," the servant said. "She says she's lost her way. She's soaked through." "A princess out in this weather? Whatever next?" exclaimed the king. "Oh well, I'd better go see." But the prince got there before him. He was already on his knees before a most elegant young lady. In fact, he was just about to ask her to marry him. Luckily, the queen arrived in the nick of time and whisked the young lady away to change her wet things. "Well," the king said, when the queen came back downstairs, "is she a princess?" "I bet she's just a pop star or a prime minister's daughter, like all the other girls he falls in love with. I'm beginning to hate the word princess. I didn't have so much trouble falling in love with a princess in my day." He smiled fondly at the queen. "I think I'll have to give her the test," the queen said, "and hope she passes." "Test?" queried the king. The queen explained. "A pea. How can you tell if she's a princess with a pea?" puzzled the king. "You just wait till morning," the queen said, smiling. Next morning the king paced up and down the sunlit breakfast room. "Isn't she up yet?" he asked his wife. "I hate people who lie in bed all day." "Patience," said the queen. "Let's see if my little plan has worked." At last the young lady appeared. The king gasped. She looked awful, as if she'd never gone to bed at all. The prince rushed up to her. "Darling, what's the matter?" he said. "Mother, didn't you give her our softest bed?" "Of course I did," replied the queen. "I put down 20 mattresses, one on top of the other, then 20 eiderdown quilts on top of them. What could be softer than that?" "I feel black and blue all over," the young lady complained as she dropped into a chair. I'm covered with bruises the size of potatoes. That was the most uncomfortable bed I have ever slept in." When he heard that, the prince turned pale with fright. What if she left the palace and he never saw her again? "But I did get a little sleep eventually," the young lady went on. "About 4 o'clock I couldn't stand it any longer, so I got out of bed and felt under the mattresses. You won't believe what I found." She held something out on the palm of her hand. "A pea?" said the prince. "Who left that there? I'll have their head chopped off." "A pea," said the king happily. "I understand now. Only a princess would be kept awake by a pea under her mattress." 20 mattresses, his wife reminded him. So the prince and the princess were married and lived a long and happy life together. And every night before they went to bed, the prince, even when he was king, checked under the mattress to make sure that no one had put even the tiniest pea there.